July 27, 1942. 73° N, 25° E. The Barents Sea. The ice doesn't crack here, it screams. Commander Jack Broom stands on the bridge of HMS Keppel, watching 35 merchant ships plow through water so cold it could kill a man in 4 minutes. The convoy stretches across the gray horizon like a steel necklace, each vessel laden with tanks, aircraft, ammunition, $400 million worth of war material bound for the Soviet Union. PQ-17, the largest Arctic convoy ever assembled. Broom adjusts his binoculars, scanning the pack ice drifting past the destroyer's hull. 24 hours of daylight up here in summer. Nowhere to hide. The Germans know they're coming. Temperatures drop to 32 degrees. Sir? Reports Lieutenant Commander Arthur Bickford, his breath visible in the wheelhouse despite it being July. Med officer says we're heading into weather. Broom grunts. Weather? As if the Luftwaffe squadrons stationed in Norway weren't enough. As if the U-boats prowling beneath the surface weren't enough. Now the Arctic itself wants a piece of them. Behind Keppel, the convoy maintains its disciplined formation, 9 columns, each ship 600 yards from the next. American Liberty ships like the Carleton and Washington, British merchantmen, Panamanian freighters. Their holds are packed with 297 aircraft, 594 tanks, 246 trucks, and enough ammunition to supply an entire Soviet army for months. Stalin is screaming for supplies. Hitler is determined he won't get them. On the bridge of the merchant ship Empire Byron, Third Officer Ronald Kent watches the escort vessels cutting through the swells. 6 destroyers, 4 corvettes, 3 minesweepers, 4 armed trawlers, 2 anti-aircraft ships, 3 rescue ships. It seems like a lot until you remember what's hunting them. Somewhere north of here, the German battleship Tirpitz swings at anchor in Altenfjord, 45,000 tons of floating death. 8 15-inch guns that could pulverize the entire convoy from 10 miles away. The heavy cruiser Admiral Hipper, the pocket battleship Scheer. Every few hours, reconnaissance aircraft report their positions, and every few hours, those positions change. The German surface fleet is like a coiled snake, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Kent lights a cigarette with hands that shake from cold, not fear. He tells himself it's the cold. The first Luftwaffe reconnaissance plane appears at 0800 hours, a Blohm & Voss BV-138 flying boat, maintaining a careful distance beyond anti-aircraft range. It circles the convoy like a vulture, transmitting their position, course, and speed to every U-boat and airbase in northern Norway. Shadow, Broom mutters, watching the German aircraft through his glasses. They'll be on us by evening. He's right. At 1830 hours, the attack begins. 6 Heinkel He-115 torpedo bombers come in low over the water, their engines a distant drone that builds to a roar. The convoy erupts with anti-aircraft fire pom-poms hammering, oerlikons chattering, tracers arcing across the pale Arctic sky. The destroyers throw up a curtain of steel. One Heinkel explodes in a ball of orange flame, cartwheeling into the sea. Another trails smoke, struggling for altitude. But 4 get through, releasing their torpedoes at 1000 yards. White wakes race toward the convoy. On the Christopher Newport, Captain William Carter orders hard to starboard. The Liberty ship responds with agonizing slowness. These merchant vessels weren't built for evasive maneuvers. The torpedo passes 30 feet off the port bow, close enough that men on deck can see the propellers spinning in the clear Arctic water. The Navarino isn't so lucky. The torpedo strikes amidships with a thunderous boom that echoes across the convoy. Smoke and spray fountain upward. The ship shudders, lists, begins to settle. Her crew scrambles for the lifeboats. This is just the opening act. Broom tells Bickford as they watch the rescue trawler Zamalek race toward the sinking ship. The real test hasn't started. He doesn't know how right he is. That night, as the convoy pushes northeast toward the Bear Island Passage, the sky darkens for the first time in weeks, not the darkness of night, but something worse. A front is moving in from the northwest, bringing with it winds that will hit 60 knots and seas that will tower 20 feet high. The storm that the meteorologists warned about. And 800 miles southwest, in the operations room at Bletchley Park, British codebreakers hunched over German naval intercepts are reading something that makes their blood run cold. The Tirpitz has left Altenfjord. She's heading for the convoy at 20:30 hours. Rear Admiral Lewis Hamilton, commanding the distant covering force aboard HMS Duke of York, receives the Ultra intercept. His face goes pale. The convoy's close escort Broom's destroyers and corvettes wouldn't last 5 minutes against Tirpitz's main battery. And Hamilton's own battleship is 400 miles away, too far to intervene. In London, the Admiralty faces an impossible choice. July 4th, 1942. 0900 hours. Admiralty Headquarters, London. First Sea Lord Admiral Sir Dudley Pound stares at the map of the Arctic, his jaw tight. He hasn't slept in 36 hours. The intelligence is clear, Tirpitz. Admiral Hipper, Scheer, and 6 destroyers have sortied from Altenfjord. They're heading west, directly toward PQ-17's projected position. Captain John Eccles, the duty officer, watches his superior's face. Pound's health has been failing. The man is exhausted, his judgment clouded by the weight of the war. But right now, he holds the lives of 600 merchant seamen in his hands. If Tirpitz reaches them, Eccles doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't have to. Pound makes his decision. At 21:11 hours on July 4th, he drafts the order himself. Cruiser force withdraw to westward at high speed. 23 minutes later, a second signal. Owing to threat from surface ships, convoy is to disperse and proceed to Russian ports. Then, at 21:36 hours, the order that will haunt naval history, convoy is to scatter. July 4th, 1942, 22:15 hours. HMS Keppel, Barents Sea. Commander Broom reads the signal 3 times, certain there must be a mistake. Scatter, they're ordering the convoy to scatter. For a convoy to scatter means to abandon all formation, all mutual protection. Each ship runs alone, at its best speed, in whatever direction offers hope. It's a desperation measure, used only when surface raiders are about to fall on a convoy like wolves on a flock of sheep. But Broom has seen no sign of Tirpitz. The threat is theoretical, based on intelligence. His destroyers could stay with the merchantmen, provide at least some protection from air and submarine attack. Scattering will leave 35 cargo ships naked and alone across 500 miles of Arctic Ocean. Each one a solitary target. Sir, Bickford's voice is hollow. Are we really? Signal the convoy, Broom says, his voice like gravel. Emergency turn, scatter, proceed independently to Archangel. Across the convoy. Stunned captains read the flags going up on Keppel's halyards. Scatter, the most dreaded word in the naval vocabulary. On the Empire Byron. Captain Llewellyn watches the convoy dissolve before his eyes. Ships peel away in all directions, their neat columns disintegrating into chaos. Some head northeast toward Novaya Zemlya. Others turn south, hoping to hug the coast. A few push north toward the ice pack, gambling that they can hide in the floes. "We're on our own now, lads," Captain Llewellyn tells his crew. "God help us." The destroyers and corvettes turn southwest, racing away at 25 knots to rendezvous with the cruiser squadron. Watching them go, the merchant crews feel abandonment like a physical blow. Those gray shapes on the horizon had been their shield. Now there's nothing between them and the Germans but 700 miles of empty ocean. July 5th, 1942. 0200 hours. 75° and 40° E. The storm hits with the fury of a biblical plague. Aboard the Carleton, Captain Samuel Frankel grips the bridge rail as 50-foot waves crash over the bow. The Liberty ship climbs each mountainous swell, hangs suspended at the crest, then plunges into the trough with a shudder that vibrates through every rivet. Wind screams through the rigging at 70 knots. Spray freezes instantly on every surface, coating the ship in ice. "We're taking on weight, Captain," shouts the first mate over the howling wind. "Ice is building up forward, must be 10 tons already." Frankel curses. In these temperatures, ice accumulates so fast that a ship can become top-heavy and capsize. He orders men onto the deck with axes and steam hoses, a death sentence in this weather. They go anyway, tied to lifelines, chopping at the ice while waves threaten to sweep them overboard. The storm is both enemy and savior. The Luftwaffe can't fly in this weather. U-boats can't maintain periscope depth. For now, the merchant ships are alone with the Arctic, and the Arctic is trying to kill them, but scattered across the Barents Sea. 35 merchant ships face the storm in isolation. No one to call for help. No one to watch their backs. Just the endless gray water and the knowledge that when the weather clears, the killing will begin. July 5th, 1942. 1400 hours. Altenfjord, Norway. Tirpitz swings at anchor, exactly where she's been for the past 24 hours. Admiral Otto Schneewind stands on the battleship's bridge, frustrated beyond measure. The sortie was aborted before it began. Luftwaffe reconnaissance reported the convoy scattered, the escorts withdrawn. Hitler himself, terrified of losing his precious battleship, ordered the surface force to return to port. The great threat that caused the Admiralty to scatter PQ-17 never materialized. Tirpitz never got within 200 miles of the convoy. Schneewind doesn't know it yet, but he's just won one of the most complete victories in naval history without firing a shot. The British scattered the convoy to save it from him. Now the Luftwaffe and U-boats will destroy it piecemeal. July 5th, 1942, 1830 hours, 76° N, 50° E. The storm begins to break. Patches of watery sunlight pierce the clouds. Captain Kent on the Empire Byron scans the horizon. Searching for other ships? They're alone. At 19:15 hours, the lookout spots an aircraft, a Junkers Ju-88 bomber, circling at 3000 feet. It makes no attack, just orbits the ship, transmitting its position. "Here they come," Kent whispers. 20 minutes later, 3 Heinkel He-111 bombers approach from the south. The Empire Byron's gun crews open fire with their single 4-inch gun and 2 machine guns, pathetic defense against determined attackers. The Heinkels split up, coming in from 3 directions simultaneously. Bombs fall, one misses by 50 yards. Throwing up a geyser, another strikes the bow, punching through the deck and detonating in the forward hold. The explosion is catastrophic, tons of ammunition cooking off in a chain reaction. Fire erupts from the wound, spreading rapidly. "Abandon ship," Kent orders. The crew launches lifeboats into water that will kill them in minutes if they fall in. The Empire Byron settles by the bow, her stern rising as the forward compartments flood. Men row frantically away from the dying ship, watching her slide beneath the surface with a roar of escaping air. They're 400 miles from the nearest land, in lifeboats, in the Arctic. Across the scattered remains of PQ-17, the slaughter has begun. July 6th, 1942. 0600 hours. 77° N, 55° E. The Washington is dying. And she knows it. Captain John Jorgensen stands on the tilting bridge, watching smoke pour from the engine room hatch. The U-boat Torpedo struck at dawn U-456 under Kapitänleutnant Max Martin Teichert, surfaced and firing at point-blank range. The German submarine didn't even bother to submerge afterward. Why would it? There's no escort to chase it away. Fires reach the ammunition stores. "Sir," reports the chief engineer, his face blackened with soot. "We've got maybe 10 minutes. Jorgensen nods. He's already ordered the lifeboats lowered. 43 men crowd into 3 small boats, watching their ship burn against the pale Arctic sky. The Washington had been carrying 1,000 tons of TNT. When she goes, the explosion will be visible for 50 miles. They're 2 miles away when it happens. The ship simply vanishes in a tower of flame and smoke that climbs 2,000 feet into the air. The shock wave slaps the lifeboats like a giant's hand. Debris rains down for 3 full minutes. Twisted metal, burning timber, fragments of things that used to be cargo. Then silence. Just the wind and the lap of waves against the boats. "Now what?" Captain asks a young, ordinary seaman, maybe 19 years old. Jorgensen looks at the empty horizon. The nearest land is Novaya Zemlya, 150 miles northeast, in open boats, in these conditions, with no food and minimal water. He does the math and doesn't like the answer. "We row," he says. "We row, and we don't stop." July 6th, 1942, 1200 hours. U-boat command, Narvik, Norway. Konteradmiral Hubert Schmundt studies the plot board with satisfaction. Red pins mark confirmed kills 5 merchant ships sunk in the past 18 hours. Yellow pins indicate ships under attack or damaged. The entire Barents Sea has become a shooting gallery, and his U-boats are having a field day. U-334 reports sinking 1 freighter. 6,000 tons, announces a signals officer. U-88 has torpedoed another. She's burning, but still afloat. Schmundt lights a cigar. "How many submarines do we have in contact?" 11, Herr Admiral. And Luftwaffe 5 is launching another strike, now 18 bombers, 6 torpedo planes. This is what the Convoy system was designed to prevent isolated merchants, alone and vulnerable, hunted by coordinated packs of predators. The British gave them this victory by scattering the convoy. Schmundt almost feels grateful. July 6th, 1942, 1430 hours. SS Paulus Potter, 76° N, 60° E. Captain Jacobus Gerritsen has been running northeast for 36 hours, pushing the Dutch freighter's engines beyond their rated capacity. He's aiming for the ice pack, gambling that he can hide among the floes where submarines can't follow and aircraft can't spot him easily. The gamble fails at 1430 hours when 5 Junkers Ju-88s appear from the south. "All hands to action stations," Gerritsen roars. But the words are barely out when the first bomb hits. It strikes the aft deck, blowing a hole 10 feet across. The second bomb misses, detonating in the water alongside. But the near miss ruptures plates below the waterline. The ship shudders, loses way. The third bomb hits the bridge directly. First Officer Peter Van Zandt finds himself lying on the deck, ears ringing, covered in debris, where the bridge used to be. There's just twisted metal and fire. Captain Garretson is gone, simply gone, vaporized by the blast. Half the bridge crew with him. Van Zandt takes command of a ship that's already dying. The fires are out of control. Water pours through the hull breach. He orders abandon ship, knowing that in these temperatures, abandoning ship is just choosing a different way to die. 37 men make it to the lifeboats. They watch the Paulus Potter burn for 2 hours before she finally rolls over and sinks. Her cargo of trucks and aircraft sliding into the abyss. Keep rowing northeast, Van Zandt orders through chattering teeth. The ice pack. We can maybe beach on Novaya Zemlya. Nobody mentions that Novaya Zemlya is uninhabited Arctic wasteland. At least it's land. July 7th, 1942, 0800 hours. SS Bolton Castle, 75° N, 48° E. Some ships have luck, and some ships have Captain Richard Elsden. Elsden has been a merchant captain for 23 years, and he's survived torpedoes before. When PQ-17 scattered, he made a calculated decision: run south, hug the Norwegian coast as closely as possible, and rely on fog and boldness to see him through. For 3 days, the Bolton Castle has played a deadly game of hide-and-seek. When U-boats surface, Elsden runs directly at them, forcing them to dive or risk being rammed. When aircraft appear, he steers into fog banks or snow squalls. He zigzags constantly, never maintaining course for more than 10 minutes. His gun crews stay at their stations around the clock, firing at anything that moves. Aircraft bearing 270, shouts the lookout. Elsden doesn't even look up. Hard to port, make smoke. The ship heels over, her single stack belching black oil smoke that streams behind them like a curtain. 3 Heinkel bombers roar past, their bombs falling harmlessly into empty water. By the time they circle for another pass, the Bolton Castle has vanished into her own smoke screen. Captain's gone mad, mutters one of the seamen. Mad like a fox, replies the bosun. We're still alive, aren't we? July 8th, 1942, 1600 hours. Matochkin Strait, Novaya Zemlya. 6 ships made it to the ice. 6 out of 35. The Samuel Chase, Benjamin Harrison, Bellingham, Donbass, Azerbaijan. An ironclad push into Matochkin Strait, a narrow passage that cuts through the desolate island. Ice crowds both sides. Mountains of gray rock rise to 2,000 feet, streaked with snow. There's no sign of human habitation, no radio signals, no help. But there are no Germans either. Captain Alexander Nestor of the Bellingham stands on his bridge, surveying the other ships anchored in the strait. Damaged, low on fuel, their crews exhausted beyond measure. They've survived, but they're trapped. The Germans know approximately where they are. It's only a matter of time before bombers arrive to finish the job. We need to camouflage the ships, Nestor tells his officers. Paint the superstructures white, string nets, make us blend into the ice. It's desperate work, but it's something to do besides wait for death. That night, as the midnight sun circles the horizon without setting, Nestor walks the deck alone. Around him, men sleep at their stations, too exhausted to go below. The silence is profound, just wind and the groan of ice. 400 miles southwest, 24 merchant ships have been sunk or are sinking. 1,500 men dead or dying in lifeboats scattered across the Arctic. The worst convoy disaster in naval history. And somewhere out there, perhaps a dozen ships are still running, still fighting, refusing to give up. The Bolton Castle is one of them. July 9th, 1942. 0300 hours. SS Troubadour, 73° N, 52° E. Captain John Wharton hasn't slept in 4 days. He doesn't dare. The moment he closes his eyes, he sees the Earlston exploding, watched it happen through binoculars yesterday. A U-boat torpedo breaking her back. The Troubadour was only 3 miles away, close enough to hear the screams. They didn't stop, couldn't stop. Stopping meant death. Now the old freighter limps southward at 8 knots, her engines wheezing, her plates groaning with every swell. She's carrying 350 tanks, urgently needed by the Red Army fighting at Stalingrad. Wharton knows what those tanks mean, knows that every hour he keeps steaming is an hour closer to getting them where they're needed. Periscope port bow, 500 yards. The lookout's shout sends men scrambling. The single 4-inch gun swings toward the bearing. But it's too late. The torpedo track is already visible, a white wake racing toward them through the gray water. "Brace!" Wharton roars. The torpedo strikes amidships with a dull boom. The ship lurches sideways. Wharton grabs the binnacle to keep from falling. Below, men are shouting. Steam hisses from ruptured pipes. But the Troubadour doesn't sink. The torpedo hit the armor plating of the tanks. In the hold, the explosion was contained. Damage report. Flooding in number 3 holds, sir, but the bulkheads are holding. We've lost 2 knots of speed. 6 knots now, barely faster than a man can walk. The U-boat, U-255 under Captain Lieutenant Reinhard Resch, surfaces 1000 yards astern. His deck gun crew already manning their weapon. They're going to finish the job with gunfire. Wharton makes a decision born of desperation and pure fury. Hard to starboard. Full speed. We're going to ram the bastard. The Troubadour turns toward the submarine, her bow wave rising. Reche sees it coming and realizes with horror that the merchant ship is attacking him. His crew scrambles to dive, the klaxon blaring. The submarine's bow dips beneath the surface just as the Troubadour passes over her position. Nothing. They missed. But Reche has had enough. U-255 stays deep. Breaking off contact. One damaged freighter isn't worth the risk of being rammed. Wharton slumps against the bridge rail, shaking. His gun crew is cheering. They drove off a U-boat with a cargo ship. It's insane. It's magnificent. "Set course for Archangel," he orders. "We're going home." July 10th, 1942, 1200 hours. Lifeboats from SS Olopana, 74° N, 45° E. They've been in the boats for 5 days. 42 men left the Olopana when she sank. 31 are still alive. The others succumbed to hypothermia. Their bodies gently slipped overboard with whispered prayers. Chief Engineer Thomas Kelly watches each one go with the knowledge that he'll probably join them soon. The boats are taking on water. Ice forms on the gunnels faster than they can chip it away. They have no food left, and the water rations were exhausted yesterday. Some men drink seawater despite Kelly's warnings. They die faster, their minds going first, babbling about home before the cold takes them. "Sail, I see a sail." Kelly jerks his head up, hardly daring to hope. There on the horizon, the unmistakable silhouette of a ship. But which side as it approaches? Kelly makes out the lines of a Soviet trawler. The Kreml part of the auxiliary flotilla sent out from Murmansk to search for survivors. The Russians pull the emaciated, frost-bitten merchant seamen aboard with efficiency born of practice. They've picked up a dozen boatloads in the past week. "You are safe now," says the Russian captain in broken English. "We take you to Murmansk." Kelly nods, unable to speak. 31 survivors. The Olopana had a crew of 63. July 11th, 1942. 0900 hours. Matochkin Strait. Novaya Zemlya. The Luftwaffe finally finds them. 15 Junkers. Ju-88s roar over the mountains, their pilots spotting the camouflaged ships immediately despite the paint and netting. The strait is too narrow for evasive maneuvers. The 6 merchantmen are trapped like fish in a barrel. Captain Nestor of the Bellingham watches the bombers form up for their attack run. His gun crews open fire, throwing up flak that bursts harmlessly below the bombers. The Junkers dive. The Donbass takes a direct hit, her cargo of ammunition detonating in a massive fireball that rocks every ship in the anchorage. Fragments of steel rain down across the strait. The shockwave shatters windows on the Benjamin Harrison, half a mile away. The Azerbaijan is hit next. 3 bombs turning her into a blazing wreck in under a minute. Men leap from her decks into water so cold it stops their hearts before they can drown. "Cut cables full ahead," Nestor shouts. If they stay anchored, they'll all die. Better to run. Even if there's nowhere to run to, the 4 surviving ships scatter down the strait, their engines screaming. The bombers circle for another pass. But fog is rolling in from the Kara Sea thick. Beautiful fog that swallows the ships like a benediction. The Germans drop their remaining bombs blind, achieving nothing but disturbing the ice. By the time the fog lifts, the 4 merchantmen have disappeared into the Arctic labyrinth. The Luftwaffe reports all 6 ships destroyed. They're wrong, but it will take weeks for anyone to know the truth. July 13th, 1942. 1800 hours. Approaches to Archangel. The Bolton Castle limps into Archangel Harbor, flying her battle ensign. Her crew manning the rails in dress uniform despite their exhaustion. Captain Elston has brought his ship through 2000 miles of hell with style. Dock workers stop to stare as the battered freighter ties up. Her hull is streaked with rust and salt. Her superstructure bears scorch marks from near-miss bombs. But she's intact, her cargo of tanks and aircraft undamaged, ready to unload. Elston steps onto Soviet soil and is immediately surrounded by Russian officers wanting to shake his hand. Through an interpreter, a political commissar tells him, "You are hero of Soviet Union. Stalin himself will hear of this. Elston just wants a bath and 12 hours of sleep. He gets neither. There's paperwork, debriefings, inspections." But that night, sitting in the officer's mess of a Russian destroyer, drinking vodka that could strip paint, he allows himself a moment of satisfaction. He made it, against U-boats, bombers, ice, and the Arctic itself. He brought his ship through. Over the next week, 10 more ships straggle into Archangel and Murmansk. The Troubadour, her engine room flooded but her will unbroken. The Samuel Chase and Benjamin Harrison, escaping from Novaya Zemlya after the fog. The Winston-Salem, the Hoosier, the Alcoa Ranger. 11 ships out of 35. That's the final tally. 24 ships sunk 430 tanks, 210 aircraft, 350 vehicles, and 316 tons of cargo lost. 153 merchant seamen dead. The greatest disaster in the history of Arctic convoys. but 11 ships made it through. July 28, 1942. Admiralty Headquarters, London. The silence in the conference room is suffocating. Admiral Sir Dudley Pound sits at the head of the table, his face drawn and gray. Before him lies the preliminary report on PQ-1724 merchant ships sunk. 153 dead. 2/3 of the convoy destroyed. The worst loss ratio in the history of convoy operations. And it wasn't the Tirpitz that did it. The battleship never fired a shot. It was the order to scatter. His order. The decision was made on the best intelligence available at the time, Pound says, but his voice lacks conviction. Around the table, junior officers study their notepads. No one meets his eyes. Captain Eccles clears his throat. Sir, Commander Broom has submitted a formal protest. He states that had the convoy remained together with its escort, losses would have been significantly lower. He believes the order to scatter was premature. Premature? A polite word for catastrophic error. Pound knows the truth. He panicked, exhausted, unwell, facing the specter of Tirpitz bearing down on defenseless merchantmen. He made the decision that haunted him. Scatter, run, save what you can. Instead, he delivered isolated victims to the slaughter. The matter will be reviewed, Pound says quietly. That is all, gentlemen. After they leave, he sits alone in the darkening room, staring at the map of the Arctic. Each red pin marking a sunken ship is an accusation. Within a year, Sir Dudley Pound will be dead, a brain tumor that had been affecting his judgment for months. But he'll carry PQ-17 to his grave. The mistake that killed 153 men and taught the Royal Navy a brutal lesson: sometimes courage means staying together, even in the face of overwhelming odds. August 3rd, 1942. Murmansk, Soviet Union. Captain Elsden stands on the quayside, watching Soviet stevedores unload the last of the Bolton Castle's cargo. American-made tanks roll down the ramps, fresh from the factory, still smelling of new paint and oil. By next month, they'll be at the front, facing panzers in the ruins of Stalingrad. A Russian liaison officer approaches, saluting. Captain Elsden, there is someone who wishes to speak with you. He's led to a warehouse that's been converted into a temporary morgue. Inside, bodies lie in rows, merchant seamen pulled from lifeboats, sailors recovered from floating wreckage. Some died from exposure, others from their wounds. All died far from home, in the service of an alliance most of them barely understood. We wish to know, says the Russian officer, if you can identify any of these men, for their families. Elsden walks slowly down the rows, looking at faces blue with cold, frozen in expressions of pain or peace. He recognizes some men he'd shared drinks with in Reykjavik, captains he'd signaled across the water during the convoy's brief time together, the second officer from the Empire Byron, the radio operator from the Olopana. He provides what names he can, knowing it's inadequate. These men deserve better than anonymous graves in frozen Soviet soil. But at least their families will know. At least someone will remember. August 15th, 1942. House of Commons, London. Questions are asked in Parliament. How could 2/3 of a convoy be lost? Why was it scattered in the face of a threat that never materialized? Who is accountable? The government deflects, citing operational security and the fog of war. The full details remain classified: the ultra-intercepts, the intelligence failures, the panic in the Admiralty. The public learns only that PQ-17 was a disaster, that brave men died, that mistakes were made. But behind closed doors, the lessons are being learned. The Admiralty studies every aspect of the operation: convoy tactics, escort strength, air cover, intelligence assessment. They realize that scattering was the worst possible option, that ships are safer together, even against superior forces, than alone and vulnerable. Future Arctic convoys will be stronger. More escorts, better air cover, clearer command protocols, and never, ever will a convoy be ordered to scatter based on anticipated threats. Only immediate, confirmed danger will justify such desperate measures. PQ-17 survivors will make those future convoys possible. September 1942. Various locations. The survivors scattered to new assignments, carrying their memories like shrapnel. Commander Broom receives a new command, another destroyer, another convoy. He never speaks publicly about PQ-17, but those who serve under him notice his obsessive attention to escort positioning, his refusal to leave merchantmen unprotected under any circumstances. Captain Elsden makes 3 more runs to Murmansk, each one successful. He retires in 1945 with the Distinguished Service Order and nightmares that will last another 30 years. The ordinary seamen, those who survived the lifeboats, the hypothermia, the weeks of terror, return to their ships or their homes. Some never sail again. Others can't stay away from the sea. They carry the weight of friends lost, of ships that went down in fire and ice, of a convoy that came apart in the worst possible place, in Murmansk and Archangel. Soviet workers unload 896 vehicles, 164 tanks, 87 aircraft, the cargo from 11 ships that refused to die. It's not enough to change the course of the war, but it's something. Tanks that will fight at Stalingrad, trucks that will carry supplies to the front, aircraft that will challenge the Luftwaffe over Soviet skies. Every shell fired, every mile driven, every bomb dropped is a small redemption for the men who died, bringing them there. July 4th, 1943. HMS Duke of York. 1 year later, Admiral Sir Bruce Fraser, Pound's successor as Commander-in-Chief of the Home Fleet, addresses his officers before dispatching convoy JW-51B to Russia. Outside, destroyers are assembling. Merchantmen are loading. The machinery of another Arctic convoy is grinding into motion. "Gentlemen," Fraser says, "you know what happened to PQ-17. Some of you were there. We lost 24 ships because we scattered in the face of a threat that never came. We let fear dictate tactics, and good men died for it." He pauses, looking each officer in the eye. "That will not happen again. Our convoys stay together. Our escorts stay with them. If the Germans want to sink our merchantmen, they'll have to go through the Royal Navy to do it. And by God, they'll pay for every ship they take." The assembled officers nod. They understand. PQ-17 wasn't just a disaster, it was a crucible. It taught the Royal Navy that courage isn't rushing forward blindly. It's standing together when everything in you screams to run. Convoy JW-51. B will face Admiral Hipper and Lutzow in the Battle of the Barents Sea. The escorts will stand and fight. They'll drive off superior German forces through sheer audacity and coordination. Only 1 merchantman will be lost, and the Germans will lose a destroyer. It's the victory PQ-17 should have been. Epilogue. The legacy of the 35 ships that made up convoy PQ-1711 reached Soviet ports. 24 were sunk by U-boats, aircraft, or a combination of both. 153 merchant seamen died, British, American, Dutch, Panamanian men from a dozen nations united by the simple goal of delivering cargo to an ally in desperate need. The strategic impact was profound. Stalin bitterly protested the losses, straining the Anglo-Soviet alliance at a critical moment. Churchill personally apologized, promising better protection for future convoys. The Germans counted it as one of their greatest victories. Proof that the Arctic route could be closed through sustained pressure. But they were wrong. Between 1941 and 1945, 78 Arctic convoys delivered 4 million tons of cargo to the Soviet Union, 7,000 aircraft, 5,000 tanks, 15,000 vehicles, ammunition, food, and raw materials that helped to keep the Red Army in the field. 97 merchant ships were lost, along with 18 escort vessels. But the route stayed open. The survivors of PQ-17 ensured that their courage under impossible circumstances, their refusal to surrender even when scattered and alone, proved that the Arctic could be challenged, that men could endure frost and fire and still deliver their cargo, that the lifeline to Russia, however tenuous, would not be cut. In harbors across Britain and America, memorials now stand to the merchant mariners who sailed the Arctic convoys. Bronze plaques list names of ships and men. But the real memorial is in the history books, in the knowledge that when civilization faced its darkest hour, ordinary sailors carried the weight of nations on their backs through the worst seas on Earth. Convoy PQ-17 was a disaster. But it was also a testament to human endurance, to the stubborn courage of men who kept sailing even when every rational instinct said to stop. They were scattered, outnumbered, and abandoned by their escorts. The Arctic tried to kill them. The Germans hunted them without mercy, and 11 ships made it through.